Einstein's plan was to forego high school and take the entrance exam to the Swiss Polytechnic, one of Europe's top technical universities. While waiting for his results, he enjoyed an extended break in Pavia. One of his sister's friends reported that he spent his time walking and cycling constantly, often daydreaming, always thoughtful. And free of the demands of school, Albert could learn about electricity firsthand in his father's factory.
I think the fact that Einstein could get his hands dirty in the factory is an important thing that's often overlooked. He had in his father and uncle's factory in Pubg a wonderful laboratory, or if you will, a playground. You see the Einstein, who was the great theoretician who only needs his pencil and paper. Working with the dynamos certainly had a fascination for him, and was an important element, I think, also in the way Einstein did his science, which is to visualize how things work.
But Albert was still a dropout with no high school diploma and no nationality, for he had renounced German citizenship to avoid military service. So when he failed the arts portion of the Swiss university exam, Albert gave in to his father's demands that he complete high school in the Swiss town Aarau. It seemed a setback, but as it turned out, it was here that Einstein first experienced what it might mean to be a scientist.
He has this great stroke of luck that he comes into an excellent school system with a new physics laboratory. So it's the combination now of some kind of orthodox training combined with the playfulness he's already exhibited, and which isn't stifled, that I think makes it such an important part of his development as a scientist and as a person.
In the laboratory, Einstein first came to grips with the physics that lay behind the electrical devices with which he was already familiar. He hooked compass needles to batteries and wires to prove to himself the fact, discovered earlier in the century, that electric currents can induce magnetic fields, and that the two are both aspects of the same phenomenon called electromagnetism. With a simple bar magnet, Einstein explored the patterns formed by a handful of iron filings, swept up by the lines of force created in a magnetic field. And when he was taught that light itself is an electromagnetic wave traveling through space, Einstein had found his life's work.
That was when it came to me, that image of riding a moonlight.
This was the first of Einstein's famous thought experiments. He created these deceptively simple scenarios to explore the most complex concepts. If light were a wave, Einstein reasoned, then no matter how fast it travels, it ought to be possible to catch up to its peaks or valleys. But then Einstein wondered, what would he see? Would the light stand still? Would time stand still? Would he ride that same peak of light forever? A glimpse of one frozen instant? At 16, Einstein could not find the answers to his questions. He was not yet a trained scientist, but this he knew was a puzzle worth his talents. But as his year in Aarau came to an end, he had to turn his thoughts to practical concerns.
Now let me see. Oh, yes, here it is. My final exam essay. My plans for the future. At university, I plan to study mathematics and physics
I suppose I will become a high school teacher of the theoretical parts of the sciences. Here are the reasons for my individual inclination for abstract and mathematical thinking and my lack of imagination.
For all that alleged lack of imagination, the 17-year-old posing for his high school graduation photograph displayed easy confidence. From Aarau, Einstein enrolled at the ETH, the Federal Public, one of the leading technical institutes in Europe. Its laboratories were second to none. Einstein admitted that he could have gotten a first-class education there, but that would have required regular attendance in class. And Einstein preferred to spend his time at his favorite haunts, including the Odeon Cafe, which remains largely unchanged to this day.
It's nothing short of a miracle that the modern methods of instruction have not yet entirely strangled youthful curiosity. For this delicate plant, aside from stimulation, stands mainly in need of freedom.
Einstein would stay in the cafes for hours, sipping coffee and talking with his classmates. Among them, two who would become lifelong friends, Marcel Grossman and Michele Bessel. And there was a third, the woman in Einstein's course. She quickly caught his eye.
February 1898. Esteemed Miss, the desire to write to you has finally overcome the bad conscience that made me avoid exposing myself to your critical eyes.
Her name was Mileva Maric. She had come from Hungary to the ETH, one of the few European universities open to women.
During graduate school, she was told by her teachers to go further. First, she went to a boys' school because, of course, the boys could go further than girls at that time. And then, I think she was rather lucky because some of her teachers told her that a school was opening in Zurich where girls were admitted, which was quite unusual at that time.
At the ETH, Mileva was enrolled in the physics teaching course, as was Einstein. She projected an air of independence and intelligence that he found highly appealing.
She probably was a kind of realization of a dream for her, because she was free. She had no family on her back. She had to take care of herself by herself. In a sense, she was freer than he was.
Gradually, Albert and Mileva came to feel that they were two of a kind.
August 1899. How closely our mental and physiological lives are linked. We both understand each other's black soul so well, not to mention drinking coffee and eating sausages.
For Einstein, these were the important things in life. Studying with Mileva, walking beside the lake, and thinking about physics. But rarely in school.
Fortunately, there were only 2 examinations, which meant, for the most part, I could do as I pleased. Of course, it certainly helped to have a friend who attended the lectures faithfully.
That friend was Marcel Grossman, a brilliant mathematician who gladly provided Einstein with his notes. Even with Grossman's help, Einstein did have to attend a few classes. Recent research in Einstein's papers has produced a portrait of a truly infuriating student.
We have here his college record, and you see something interesting happening by the third year at the ETH. We have March 1899. It says that a reprimand has been issued to Einstein through the administration. because of a lack of diligence. I think that that's an administrative way of saying that he was lazy in his in the physics practice in the physics lab. We also have, as an indication of that, a very fat one, which is almost it's essentially the lowest grade you can get. To be fair, he also gets in the electrotechnical lab that same year in 6. So certainly he has already developed that which I think is his hallmark, and that is he turns his attention and is assiduous in those areas where he wants to, and other areas he just ignores.
That kind of confidence, almost arrogance, brought Einstein into direct conflict with the head of the physics department, Professor Heinrich Weber.
You are a clever boy, Einstein, a clever boy. But you have a great fault. You never let yourself be told anything.
Of course, I wasn't going to be told anything by Weber. As far as I could tell, he thought that physics had stopped 70 years ago. Then I came up with experiments of my own. He didn't hear of it. What could I do? Just sit back and hope that Weber didn't know what I thought of him?
The experiments Einstein wanted to perform turned once again on the unsettling problem of light. His image of riding a beam of light had told him that very odd things must happen at the speed of light. Einstein's contemporaries focused on the fact that light travels in waves, which implied that light must move through some type of substance, just as waves on a lake travel through water.
One big mystery, that if light was a wave phenomenon, it must propagate in something, it must be the excitation of something, the vibrations of something. And they call this something the ether, and it really was, for the 19th century, the foundations of physics.
The ether, it was thought, filled every corner of space. The ether was supposed to make light behave itself, to make its motion conform to everyday experience. In ordinary circumstances, it's easy to analyze motion. We can measure the speed of the ship relative to the lake. We can also determine the speed of the sailor crossing the lake. A little faster than the boat when he walks forward. A little slower than the boat when he walks back towards the stern. Speed is relative here on Earth. One can add or subtract velocities depending on which way you move with respect to another moving object. But the great mystery was, would light behave the same way with respect to the ether? Would speeds add and subtract where light is concerned? Several researchers tried to measure the speed of light from the ether, using the Earth as a whole as the laboratory. The idea was that the Earth orbits the Sun at 20 miles per second, racing through the ether as it goes. That would set up a wind as the ether rushes past the Earth. And if light traveling through the ether matched ordinary experience, then a beam of light moving with the ether wind should move faster than a beam of light struggling in the opposite direction, against that 20 mile per second breeze. Unfortunately, every attempt to measure such variation in the speed of light failed. With every experiment, the speed of light remained rock steady, unchanging in any direction. Einstein would come to dismiss the notion of an ether long before any other physicist could accept such a radical step. But if there were no ether, then the message was clear. The speed of light was fixed and unchanging, an exception to all the laws of motion that govern what happens here on Earth. It made no sense, but Einstein was in no position to figure it out. In 1900, he graduated from the ETH, but his battles with Weber cost him the university job he had expected to receive. And in Pavia, his father's firm had failed. Einstein Einstein desperately needed a job.
April 1901. Esteemed Herr Professor Weiner, last summer I completed my studies at Zurich Polytechnicum, and since I would like to expand the knowledge I acquired, I am taking the liberty of asking you whether you might need an assistant. Respectfully, esteemed Herr Professor Ostwald, permit me to inquire whether you might have any use for a mathematical physicist familiar with absolute. Esteemed Herr Professor Honest, I have learned through a friend that you have a vacancy for an assistant. I am taken.
Even Hermann Einstein begged for help for his son.
Esteemed Herr Professor, please forgive the father who is so bold as to turn to you in the interests of his son. My son feels profoundly unhappy with his present lack of position, and his idea that he is now out of touch becomes more entrenched every day. In addition, he is oppressed by the thought that he is a burden to us, people of modest means. If you could secure him an assistant's position, my gratitude would know no bounds. Yours, Hermann Einstein.
I honored all the physicists from the North Sea to the southern tip of Italy with an offer of my services. Not one responded.
And amidst a growing sense of crisis, Mileva became another bone of contention.
Einstein felt very strongly against Albert marrying Mileva, and she was too dependent. I think his mother said that she's going to be always in your books and not cooking for you or something like that, and in your socks, saying that she was going to die if he was going to marry this woman. Maybe she would have died if he had married any woman, but still, this one obviously was not the right one.
July 1900. Dearest Dolly, I promise I will not tolerate my parents' opposition to you. When you failed your exams, I went into Mama's room. She asked, what will become of your little Dolly now? My wife, I told her. She threw herself on the bed. You are ruining your future. If she has a child, you'll be in a pretty mess. At this, my patience finally gave out. I denied completely we were living in sin.
But in the spring of 1901, Albert and Mileva met in northern Italy for a romantic interlude. This episode has only recently come to light with the discovery of the couple's early love letters.
You sweet little bitch. You absolutely must come to see me in Como. It will cost very little of your time and will be a heavenly joy for you. Bring a happy, light heart and a clear head. I promise you an outing the likes of which you've never seen.
I went to Como where a certain person waited for me with open arms and a pounding heart. We stayed in Como half a day, then visited Villa Carlotta. How happy I was to have my darling to myself, for myself, especially because I saw he was equally happy.
At the Villa Carlotta, the figures of Eros and Psyche that Albert and Mileva saw still dominate the entranceway. But at Como, Pauline Einstein's fears would come true. Within weeks, the news reached Albert. Mileva had become pregnant. For the next several months, Mileva remained in Zurich to retake exams she had failed, while Albert traveled throughout Switzerland as a substitute teacher. Desperation began to creep into the letters.
Dear Dolly, when you, my dear little wife, will diligently work on our science together so we don't become old Philistines. Everyone but you seems foreign to me, as if they were separated by an invisible wall.
In the fall, Einstein found a temporary tutoring job in Schaffhausen, north of Zurich. By now visibly pregnant, Mileva could not be seen with him in the same town. She hid at Stein am Rhein, 3 miles up the river. Lost amongst the tourists at the famous Rhine Falls near Schaffhausen, the couple would steal time with each other. The pretense wore on both of them.
My dear naughty little sweetheart, now you're not coming tomorrow again. And you don't even say you're coming on Sunday instead.
My dearest Dolly, I don't want to anger or tease you ever again, only to be an angel all the time. What a nice illusion. But you will still love me, won't you, even if I am the same old rogue?
Mileva would always have to compete for Albert's attention.
Dear Dolly, I have just read the most marvelous paper on the production of cathode rays by ultraviolet light. I'm filled with such joy that you absolutely must share some of it. By the way, how are your studies and our little child to be?
Mileva's studies were not going well. She failed her exams for a second time, which ended her hopes for a scientific career. She left Switzerland to give birth in her parents' home in Hungary. The couple could not marry unless Albert got a real job. They had no prospects until...
My dear sweetheart, yesterday there was a letter from Marcel in which he tells me that he takes it for certain that I'll get the position in Bern. I'm dizzy with joy when I think about it, even happier for you than for myself.
Einstein immediately rushed to Bern, 6 months before his work at the Swiss Patent Office was to begin.
February 1902. My dearest Dolly, it's delightful here in Bern. The homes are uncommonly clean. I have a large, beautiful room with a very comfortable sofa. In addition, 6 upholstered chairs and 3 wardrobes. It's glass house. B is the little bed, G is the magnificent mirror, and J is me, your little Albert.
In his new home, Einstein resumed the serious study of physics, while Mileva remained with her parents, and in January 1902 gave birth to a daughter named Liselle, a child whose existence had only recently come to light.
Lisa was discovered in the course of finding the love letters, the 54 letters, and she represented a challenge to Einstein, I don't think, of a kind that he had never had to face before, and which I think cost him a lot of pain. I think it cost Mileva much even greater pain.
Dearest, now that you see that it really is a pale girl that you wish, is she healthy? Does she cry? I love her so much, and don't even know her yet. All we need to resolve is how to keep our Lisa with us. I wouldn't want to have to give her up.
But as a new Swiss civil servant, Einstein could not risk a scandal. Keeping the child could have cost him the job, but it so little was dead. After months of wrestling with the problem, he and Mileva made their decision. Lisel was to be given up.
It wasn't cruel, it was just something convenient that many people did. Einstein and Mileva intended to take the child with them later on when they could possibly get married or when she had finished school. And this was a very ordinary plan, I think, at that time.
In the end, Einstein never saw Lisel. She fell ill and all record of her disappeared.
This marked a turning point for me. I came to understand that I have to disengage from the momentary, from the merely personal. The essence of a man of my type lies in what I think, not in what I feel.
But even Einstein could not simply will his emotions away. Shortly after Lisel was born, Hermann Einstein fell ill. When it became clear that his father was on his deathbed, Albert rushed to Italy for a final encounter.
Einstein had a very complicated relationship with his father. He was the weaker of the two parents. He felt very guilty about having demanded and received money from the father in the times when the father had progressively failed in the businesses. He also felt guilty because the father had proved to be a failure, something that he had set his mind never to be. On the other hand, he was what he loved.
My father's failures were in his health. That's what taught me how cruel life is, the endless chase just to fill our stomachs. I wanted to be with him at the end. I came into his room and we talked a little. That's when he relented and gave me permission to marry. But then he asked me to leave, and he turned his face to the wall. He died that day, alone.
Although Einstein is always pictured as someone who tried to deny emotions, as he always said, I tried to get above the only personal. This was a very powerful shock to him, and something that he perhaps said to himself will never happen again.
A few months after Hermann's death, Albert and Mileva were married in January 1903. After returning from the wedding supper, Albert had to wake up his landlord. He had forgotten his key. Einstein now started at the patent office as probationary technical expert, third class. The job was ideal for the least likely bureaucrat in the Swiss civil service.
Well, he had to work 6 days a week at great hours, 8 hours a day. He was able to consolidate the work in such a way that he could turn to his physics work either on the side or under the table.
You might not think so, but the patent office was a far better place for me than a university. Had I become a lecturer, I would have been forced to produce papers as fast as possible, no matter how trivial, and it isn't easy to resist that kind of pressure.
Instead of the university, Einstein and his friends formed a club, which they mockingly called the Olympia Academy. The club, often joined by Einstein's college friend Michele Besso, would take long walks through the mountains near Bern, discussing set topics in physics and the philosophy of science. To outward appearance, Einstein's life now seemed perfectly settled. Mileva gave birth to their first son, Hans, in 1904. Einstein had a secure government job. And now his ideas about physics began to gel. Questions of light and motion 10 years in the asking suddenly began to come clear. By 1905, Einstein simply accepted that the speed of light was absolutely constant everywhere in nature. But that left the problem of motion. There is no difficulty measuring speed here on Earth. As far as the juggler at the castle can tell, he is standing still while his twin on the boat juggles away at 5 miles an hour. Meanwhile, the juggler afloat sees it differently. He stands still while the lake, the shore, and his twin recede at 5 miles an hour. That's the principle of relativity. The idea that both jugglers can use the same laws of physics to describe the motion of the pins. But light is the wild card. Einstein was convinced that if a beam of light passes both the juggler at rest and the juggler in motion, each would measure the same speed for light. But how could that work? What happens to allow both jugglers to agree on the speed of light? That's when the breakthrough came. Speed is simply a measure of distance traveled in a unit of time. And Einstein realized that if the speed of light never changes, then something else must vary. What if, Einstein asked himself, the speed of light is constant, but the flow of time is not? It was an instantly radical thought. To everyone but Einstein, time was absolute, unchanging. The steady beat of the universe. The idea that the tick of time could waver was exceedingly difficult to accept, even for Einstein.
Hard. It took me 10 years to get from my first questions about light to my theory of relativity. I went through all sorts of nervous conflicts. And after all that, it came to me suddenly. It was a beautiful day. My friend Besso and I were out walking. I was doing most of the talking. I told him that I'd been struggling with a question that needed his help. But as I spoke, the answer came to me. He stopped in mid-sentence and ran home. The next morning I went to him again. "Thank you," I said. "I have completely solved the problem."
But what a solution! To say that time is not the same for all of us, that it flows at a different rate for someone moving than for someone standing still. Einstein proved it with another paradox. Can we all agree, he asked, that two events are simultaneous when they occur at precisely the same time? Actually, no. Einstein staged his thought experiment alongside a railroad track. Set up two poles, he said, and then measure the distance between them. Find the midpoint and mark it. Using a right-angle mirror, it is possible to see both poles. Imagine that lightning bolts hit the two poles at once. The observer beside the track could see them both in his mirror, and would be able to confirm that the two spins occur at exactly the same time. But how would the same event look to an observer on a train? He also has a two-sided mirror. At the instant he reaches the midpoint between the two poles, lightning strikes again. But the moving observer does not see the events as simultaneous. He sees the lightning strike the pole that he is moving towards first. Light takes time to move from the pole to the mirror, and in that time, the train travels towards the forward pole. The light has a shorter distance to cross to reach the mirror. So the two observers, one moving, one standing still, cannot agree when the lightning bolts hit the poles. That confirmed what Einstein intuitively grasped. Time is relative.
There is nothing mysterious or unreasonable here. All my theory does is show that time flows at different rates for each of us. But very few believe me when I tell them it's that simple.
It took Einstein